right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another webinar here at Route Consultant. This one's focused on the waste industry. My name is Josh Gregory. I am the Vice President of Education here at Route Consultant. And if you haven't been here before for any of this series, these webinars are really here to help you learn about this industry, ask questions, and really find the best way to help you move forward if you decide this is the right fit for you. And we've had, multiple weeks of this. This is a pretty good series here. So if you have questions about any aspect of it, and you're here live or you're watching online on YouTube, our YouTube page has all of these. So if you go back, you can go and see any of the ones we've done previously, and all of the ones in the future will show up there as well once we're done. Now, format-wise, the way this webinar is going to work, this is basically, I'm going to come on, we're going to do a little bit of content, some updates for you, go over some upcoming events, and also if there are any things that you have questions on, you can ask us. We'll make sure there's time at the end to answer those. Just the biggest thing is if you do have a question, make sure you put it in the Q&A window at the bottom. If you raise your hand or chat, I'll still try to get to your question, but I might miss it. So if you want to make sure it's answered, put it in the Q&A at the bottom of the window. Now, if you were here last week, we were focused on trucks. As a lot of the ways, a lot of the times in the logistics industry, we talk about it as if you can solve the people and the truck side of the equation, you got a lot of it. So we focused on trucks. So now we're going to be talking about the other side, the people. And so really what we're going to be talking about this week is how do you find your drivers and the people who work for you, and how do you keep them? And so we've brought Tommy Turbeville back on as well with his decades of experience in the industry. If you haven't met him, he's done everything from operating to owning to analyzing these businesses across the country. And so, Tommy, I see you there. If you want to go ahead and say hi, and we'll get started.
Good afternoon, everyone.
All right. Good to have you, Tommy. So let's start kind of at a really high level. And I know there might be a few answers here, depending on the type of waste segment we're talking about. But can you walk through what the requirements are to be a driver in this space?
Yeah, and since the vast majority of the trucks in this space are over 26,000 pounds, they're going to require a CDL license. And in most cases, because they are straight trucks, a Class B will suffice unless you're going over state lines, then you may have to get the Class A.
Yeah, and I think that is a big difference here when we're talking about this versus some other, unless you're coming from the line haul world in the FedEx space, this is going to require a different class of driver and a little bit different in terms of what you're going to ask of them. So, Tommy, just a quick thing for everybody who may be curious. Do owners have to have the same licenses? Do you need a CDL to be an owner of one of these?
Yes, if you're going to be getting in behind the wheel of the truck, you're not exempt from,
Yeah.
requirements.
Yeah. And, it's kind of a side question here. Do you find that a lot of owners are actually driving these, or is this something where most people, when they get in the space, are just assuming that they're going to use their drivers and they'll never get behind one of these vehicles?
Well, most of them end up just as a backup. They end up getting their CDL, but that's not the intent of what they plan to do or really need to do to, manage a space well.
Yeah, I'd say that's probably fair. It can be a nice to have to be, an operator with a CDL, just so that you've kind of got, if something does happen, you can jump in, because if you don't, if there's any day where you have a driver call out, or you don't have somebody you can put on the route, if you don't have your CDL, it's not like something you can go run out to Walmart and grab. You're kind of out of luck at that point. Now, is this something? Is there anything else that any kind of basic requirements a driver has to have? Are there any kind of background checks or anything like that they have to go through?
No, I mean, if they can pass, CDL license, and of course that requires all the DOT requirements, they're good to go.
Got it. Yeah, and I guess that's one of the benefits of basically not being tied to a larger company like FedEx or Amazon, is that you do get some control there in terms of who you bring in. Did you guys ever check drivers just for your own purposes, or did you just kind of, if they checked the boxes on CDL, that was enough?
Yeah, I mean, we didn't really do any additional background checks. Of course, I would say the one thing we always check were their driver's license record, but
Yeah.
you know, that was really good.
Would you ever follow up with the CDL school that they came from to validate it, or just kind of, if they've got the documents, it's enough?
Typically, if they had the documents and they could pass the driver test, that's
Yeah. Yeah. Now, would you ever driver test them yourselves when you brought them on, or is it you just kind of counting on the CDL school?
no. Typically, we would do a driver test just to make sure they could do what they said they could do.
Yeah. Did you have a man like what did that test look like? Did you create it yourself, or what were you kind of checking on there?
It was really, we would have a set route,
Mhm.
from the facility, just have them go out. We would basically have two. One that was just right hand turns if we knew early on that we didn't want them making a left hand turn, and
Yeah.
the other would be one that where they would make left hand turns as well.
Okay. Any horror stories in your initial driver test with anybody?
There were some scary moments on a few.
Yeah, I believe it. I mean, they're big vehicles, they're not small. So, especially like, how often do you have people who come straight from maybe they've never done trash, any kind of waste vehicle, but they've done like over the road line haul. Do you find that they're different vehicles? Do you find that the skills translate directly, or is there ever a big learning curve there?
Well, I would say if they have driven a similar truck, a dump truck,
Yeah.
cement truck, or even an over the road truck, their skills translate pretty well.
Okay. Okay. So hopefully that's enough for everybody. You get the CDL and they'll work out. But probably does sound good to do some kind of driving test there.
Yes.
Um, when you're thinking about people, when you're doing the interviews, are there any particular skills or personality traits that you're looking for in a new hire?
Well, I've always had a motto that you hire for attitude and train for skill. Of course, they have to be able to drive. But the biggest thing I would say from a background perspective is this person has done outside work. Although it is a driver in this industry, guys are getting out in the elements when they go to the, disposal site, things of that sort. And there is a degree of physical labor. It's not huge in most of these, but there is a degree of it. And so have just found, if it's somebody that got their CDL, but they have been sitting behind a desk all their life, they typically don't translate well into this industry.
Got it. So, do you try to put those like really upfront, make sure it's in all the job ads, and how clear do you have to make it to make sure that people actually understand what the requirements?
Uh, I think in the job ads, you're primarily because the biggest item is the license,
Mhm.
doing that, but then you handle that in the interview, whether you do it video or in person. I always like in person interviews best because that way you get to see, and then you just explain to them the realities of what the position is.
Yeah. Did you usually find that it was the one interview and the driver test was enough to get people to kind of validate them?
Yeah, most of the time. I mean, there are, you know, in today's hiring environment, you don't just have an overabundance of qualified applicants. So, it is those, you don't change your standards, but typically, if you do this enough, you are able to get a good read, on somebody when you're sitting down face to face.
Yeah, some of that just is going to come from kind of the instincts of knowing, how they answer those questions, what they're looking for, and what you're looking for, and making sure that everybody's on the same page there. Now, where do you typically go to find drivers? Is it, what are the different places you go, purely online, or are there any other avenues?
Well, I mean, again, today, having something on a job posting site is important because you're going to reach people that you wouldn't reach by word of mouth. One
Mhm.
of the things that I have had success in over the years is offering referral bonuses to my existing employees,
Yeah.
and where, if they bring the people on, then I would spread it out over 90 days, 180 days, 3 6 months, where
Yeah.
I would pay them something to do that, and I would rather pay them than do that. The other thing, in addition to that, that I had success on was I would have a an additional annual bonus for every year the person they referred was still there when both of them were still there. And I know I had a guy one year that made like an extra $1,500. It was like $100 bonus, and he made like an extra $1,500. And he was probably one of the people I originally thought would be the least likely to go out and promote the
Yeah.
company and do.
Yeah. And that just goes to show, we can, there, like you said, there's some instinct, there's some knowing of what we should expect from a driver, but at the end of the day, a lot of people will surprise you, good and bad ways, in terms of what they decide to do. But I would, that referral, the kind of the annual bonus is great. One, it helps kind of keep them there, but two, that guy who's getting an annual bonus knows that if his friend's thinking about quitting, it is worth it for him to go be the guy who takes him out to a beer, relaxes him, keeps him there. So I think everybody's working together to kind of keep things moving in the right direction. And it doesn't have to be a huge expense. And it is, if that guy's getting paid $1,500, but he's got 15 referrals that he's brought and kept in the business, that's easily worth that. No question.
And it wasn't necessarily just people he knew. If he ran into somebody, he went to a convenience store and there was somebody there delivering something and it was a big truck, he would say, "Hey, you know, we're hiring."
Yeah.
But I tell you, never stop hiring. I mean, just always keep that pipeline full somehow, some way.
Yeah. Is there anything you do? So let's say you found somebody who's great. You've interviewed them, they're a great fit, but there's not a current opportunity. How would you typically handle those types of people? Would you try to find something for them, or just tell them, I'll call you back in a little while? How can you kind of keep those people interested?
Well, my theory was when I found the rock star that I felt really good about, I would hire. Um, and I tell folks all the time, sometimes you manage the schedule more than you manage the number of people.
Yeah.
And so, you know, if you have routes, if you're paying hourly, if you have routes that are close to 40 hours in 4 days, let your folks get on those 10-hour day routes, the ones that want to do that. And then that also gives you a buffer for a call off or, things of that sort where you can call that person back in. But I would, as many good people as I could find, I would hire, and then I would manage the schedule more than I would manage the people. That
Got it.
makes sense.
Yeah, definitely does. You got to do whatever it takes to kind of keep those people that have potential and are worth adding value in your organization. Um, are there any, sometimes we hear of like military or firefighters, those types of, are there any of those different kind of pockets of the workforce that you've targeted and found success on?
Yeah, I mean, we've had success in the past on firefighters. Again, it's managing the schedule, but they're dependable. They show up. You just have to manage it. But, they drive big straight trucks for the most part.
Yeah.
They're the elements, the weather really doesn't bother them that much. So we have had success very specifically with firefighters.
Okay, great. Yeah. And you always know that they're going to have 24 hours on, 40 hours, 8 hours off. So like you're saying, scheduling, it may not be that they're work every day of the week for you, but you may have a really consistent firefighter who they're almost always have some kind of side job. They've almost always got something that you're working on. So that might be a great kind of workforce to target. So, you've got them on, you've hired them. What do you typically do as kind of your onboarding process to get these new hires up to speed?
Well, I tell folks, big and small companies, for the most part, I don't think they do a good job of onboarding. And I think it is one of the most critical things to do to get that person past the first 30 days, but even into the 3 months, 6 months, because if you can get somebody to stay on for 6 months in any industry, you have a much better likelihood. And so uh, typically the people that work well, it's not something you put them in a classroom setting for 2 or 3 days and show them videos or give them paperwork to read and sign. I mean, they're just, that the people that typically work in this, that just drives them crazy. Um, but here's what I would tell you, that most of it, again, there's the paperwork they've got to sign to get them going. If you can do that before they ever typically start, and then pay them the 2, 3, 4 hours, whatever it takes to do that, or just pay them the 4 hours for coming in and getting it done. And then when they start their onboarding, a couple of things that are critical. One is introducing them to the team. And so many people, somebody shows up and everybody's just, they don't even really know who they are. And so it's making that person feel welcome. But the other thing that works well in the onboarding in this industry is shadowing people. Uh, I think you need to be very specific. I would tell you, you need to have at least a 2 week schedule that this person knows coming in. Hey, here's what we're going to do. Here's who we're going to have you work with. But the person that you put them with to shadow is critical. Because you don't want your grumpiest employee, although they may be good at their job, being the person to teach somebody what to do. But I would have very, very focused attention on the pre-trip and the post-trip. Go through that. I mean, spend extra time on that. The actual operation of the truck, because chances are these people have seen these trucks go down the road, but there are certain things on the operation. Very, very focused details on their driving, the safety of their driving, things that they need to be able to do, have checklists for them to come off, and then just the overall route operation. But I would tell you, a minimum of 2 weeks of very good onboarding. And then the other thing from an onboarding standpoint is sitting down with them after that first 2 weeks and going over that. What else do you need? Are you comfortable? Are you ready? Those types of things, because most of the time we're pressed for people, and they just start throw them out and say good luck.
Yeah.
And they keep their fingers crossed. The first week they're out and hope they don't run over something.
Yeah. And, I don't think I think you're exactly right. I don't think it's talked about enough how important that kind of first period of time, those first couple of weeks are. One, for making the employee feel comfortable and kind of helping to make sure they stay longer. But two, you've got to teach the right habits at the beginning, because that's what they're going to remember and that's what they're going to do. And so exactly right. Yeah. Just because you've got an amazingly efficient driver doesn't mean that they're going to teach the right behaviors and attitudes just because you put a shadow with them. Because they may be, grumpy, or they may get their job done well, but they're doing, 3 things that you wish they wouldn't. And I'd much rather everybody who's coming in learn the right habits from the beginning. And I think that you're exactly right. It's crucial for having good employees and having good employees for a long time. Now, once you've got them, once you've got your employees, what are you doing on any kind of ongoing basis to see if they're doing a good job, to evaluating them?
Well, I think we've spoke before in this industry. Service is absolutely critical. It's once you get the customer, if you do what you say when you say you're going to do it, I mean, you have a chance of keeping them for years. So I think that there's several things that are critical. One is definitely customer service. Are they taking care of the routes? Are they, you know, are, are they not leaving out stops just because for whatever reason? So that's just a given. Um, the other is, are they safe personally and others around them? Again, this is pretty heavy equipment, and they get in places, it's little things like, are they in the landfill, in the disposal site? Are they being safe? Are they doing that? Are they trying to squeeze into places that, they're not supposed to go to try to get their load dumped and move out? And then the other, I would say, a big one is driver safety, of course. And of course, there's all kinds of ways you can go about doing that, but technology today, that is the best way, put something on your trucks to see if they're doing that. So, I mean, those are really the three big things, and there's different ways to do all of them, but, to check up on those, but those are really the big three.
Yeah. Now for you, let's say a driver has one safety issue. What's kind of your rule of thumb? How do you think about how quickly to correct versus firing an employee? Like what's the instant strikeout for you versus how many opportunities do you give them to improve?
Well, I think, a whole lot of it depends on exactly what it is. Um, it's one of those things, if, accidents are something I just don't tolerate, period. Um, if it's minor, they may have one shot, but if it's, especially if they were absolutely the root cause of the accident. So accidents are one thing. Driving infractions, look at them. If I have the technology, I just focus on that for a while, make sure we're talking to them, making sure we're seeing those improvements. If it's speeding, for example, are they staying within the guidelines on speeding? Or, are they, if it is, they cut a corner too short, I mean, just, I didn't have a hard, fast rule in most cases. But there always comes a time. I mean, anytime you get to, 2 or 3 in a 12-month period, you're putting yourself at risk just from an insurance perspective.
Yeah, and what we've always found is that frequency breeds severity. So just because it hasn't been a big accident yet, the person who's had one or two is much more likely to have, more and eventually have one that's going to cause a lot of problems. So I think that's always important to kind of think through.
Yeah.
Now, anything in particular that you do to differentiate yourself from other owners to kind of help retain drivers?
Well, I tell folks, one of the biggest things, and I know this just sounds like a cliche, but it's really the leadership at the facility. It is, are you treating the people with respect? Are you giving recognition when it's due? Um, it is there good communication? Not that people have to wonder what's going on. Is their equipment safe, reliable, dependable? Because that's one of the things that frustrates these guys more than anything is spending time on the side of a road because something obvious wasn't taken care of. Um, and then the other thing that I think is really critical in this space is making sure in the morning everything's ready to go.
Hmm.
Uh, when they come in, they're here on time, they're ready to hit the road and go. If you're saying, oh, I didn't get to this, or hold on, let me get this, let me get that. I think it's those little things like that that have a huge impact on people saying, hey, yeah, this is something they'll get through this. So when it happens occasionally, there's forgiveness. Otherwise, it's like I can't depend on these guys, and there's enough people looking, they'll go somewhere else.
Yeah, and I think that last point is always true, is that you got to continue to be the place that they can depend on and that they know what they can get, they know what to expect from you because there's always other opportunities. And you don't, that might not always be actually a better opportunity, but they're always going to be looking and thinking about it. And so you just want to continue to make it a place, not where you just do everything they say, but at least keep it something where they know what to expect and that you're upholding your end of the bargain, at least in terms of having them ready for each day.
Yeah, that's critical.
And how long do you think the average employee is staying with you? Like, what's the normal turnover that you expect?
Well, And it's basically like any other transportation industry. For the most part, right now, the average is a little under 2 years. Um, but if you get and do that onboarding and you knock out those that leave in the first 6 months, that increases dramatically.
Yeah, got it.
Um, because it's that turnover of those people in the first 6 months that really drive that. That's why, I really push how critical onboarding is to get them past that 6 month span.
Yeah. And honestly, I mean, even for some people on the FedEx side, you're used churning through the same position multiple times in a year. So 6 months is a great, you can get 6 months, that's great. So 2 years is even better. Now, just as a last question, what kind of benefits did you normally offer, or did you see offered to by others in this space?
Well, I think one thing that's very common is, of course, holidays. In this space, different than others, is your holidays are really going to be determined by the holidays taken by your disposal side.
Yeah.
So, and they do take holidays. Now they'll work on Saturday. They typically don't work on Sunday, but they do observe holidays. So almost all of them take the big six. But and some may take more, but compensating those guys for not working on that day is critical because they're going to have to make it up. One thing about this space is, for the most part, it has to be made up. It's not something you just skip it, or it has to be made up. So, a holiday during the week in residential, typically it's 5 days a week. That means you're going to have to work on a Saturday, and so paying those guys for that holiday. So that is a very, I mean, that's something you just have to do, or you're going to lose a lot of your staff after the first holiday.
Yeah.
Uh, and I would say, the good ones at least provide somehow, again, the employee contributes in a medical and life insurance policy.
Okay.
Because although a lot of them may not participate, a lot of them will participate because that's something they know. If they have families, they know they have to do that. They don't take that risk. And a lot of that, those turn out to be your best employees because they see that need. Uh, I mean, so those are two. I mean, there's other things. A couple that I would throw out that I would say is worth your while, but I would consider them a benefit, is some type of safety incentive. You do those right, they pay for themselves. And it's a great opportunity for people to do that. The other that I see good companies do is, although they may not be large enough to have a formal 401k plan, they have some type of profit sharing plan of some sort. Because what that does is that helps get the people involved. They understand if they, you know, don't put oil in the engine and they burn up an engine, that's going to impact them. So, I would say holidays, medical, some type of safety incentive, and if you can find a way to do some type of profit sharing, and I'm not saying that it's a percentage, I'm saying it's a flat dollar amount, because that gets your people involved.
Perfect. Yeah, and I think that's kind of your options. There's no requirement there. You've got all of these options, and it's about finding the right pieces that work for your employees, because a benefit's not a benefit if they don't use it. So it's about finding something that your employees are actually wanting. There's always, you could, a good thing to potentially do is to look at job ads in an area before you start hiring and see what other benefits are being offered by others in that area, just to know kind of what might make you competitive in that market. But yeah, there's lots of different ways you can do it, lots of different things that people are looking for, and it can be a way to really help attract better talent, because you're maybe offering benefits no one else is, and retaining them longer. And sometimes the benefits are more recruiting than retention, because it may be that they don't actually use them, but they click on your job ad because you're offering something no one else is.
Yeah, it's a good point.
So perfect. I think that's everything that I wanted to cover today. So just as a quick reminder, if you've never been here, we are going to continue to have these webinars every week, and there are all of our previous webinars online as well. We have a free 101 on our website that you can use to learn, quickly about the space and get a quick overview. We also have our new investor summits that are live. So we have the Waste New Investor Summit that you can sign up for and take right now. Not only is it some digital coursework, basically think of it as a 201, it also includes an in-person workshop that we have in Nashville. And really, that's a way for you to come, get all of your questions answered, review specific listings, talk to our team, talk to Tommy, and try to make sure that this is the right space for you. That New Investor Summit is a place for you to have confidence in the industry and to move forward. So if you have interest in any of that, reach out to our team at info@routeconsultant.com. Other than that, we'll keep being here every week. So Tommy, thank you for being here and always providing your expertise.
Thanks.
And thanks everybody, and we'll see you next week.